Let me share with you my screen. And yes, I will talk about the prospects for Russia, and not only the Russia, but the different countries. You will see today four short cases. I mean the different countries. Russia, of course, because I'm from Russia, US, China, and Germany. US and China, there are two polars in the world economy, and the Germany is in the middle zone, in the European zone, and Russia, of course, because we can talk about Russian economy more correctly because we know more about the situation inside. And I would like to show you what we can know about the world economy and about the perspectives of world economy in this situation in face of great uncertainty, which was raised due to COVID situation, because the forecasts from the very honored organization, for example, World Bank or International Monetary Fund, now change their forecast during 3 months, one time in 3 months, and this is really great uncertainty. But what can we know, and maybe a little bit what can we do with this situation? And I would like to stress your opinion on short-term perspectives is it's more clear for us now, and maybe we will discuss about the long-term perspectives, because long-term maybe based on the fundamental factors of world economy development, and the most problem the middle term perspectives. This is absolutely out of our vision. And we discuss some barriers to growth and possibility to growth in emerging markets, and especially for Russia. And I will show you a list of the most actual publication about the COVID situation, about the economic issue of pandemics. Firstly, I would like to discuss with you the uncertainty of today, the nature of uncertainty. Firstly, it's about the nature of today's economic crisis. This is absolutely unusual for us because the previous crisis, especially at 2008 till 2014, it was the depression and the real world economic crisis. This one caused by the unusual nature, I mean, economic, not financial factors. Demand for goods and services fell sharply and unexpected. I don't know what about you, but me couldn't imagine myself that the situation in China were outflow to our country and rest of the world, and the business and population were absolutely not ready for this very very fast spread of the infection. Over 3 months, COVID reached global distribution, and we need to understand how world sustainable developing, and what about the sustainable of healthcare system in different countries. Does government in each countries will overcome with the situation? Thus, our government can change the population behavior, for example, consumer population. Uh, Thus, it will be possible to organize a stay-at-home regime, and along the crisis, health system shows the actual problems, and Russian government faced other specific for our economy problem, falling down the oil prices. You know that the oil and gas price for us, one of the most important factor of development. About 30% of GDP depended with the world oil and gas market, and now we are clear to the dramatic level of the oil and gas price due to the situation with the agreement OPEC plus plus. And what about uncertainty again? About the how the forecasts adjusted for absolutely mobile situation. You see that the International Monetary Fund Foundation forecast in April the drop in world GDP will be about 3%. But after 3 months only, the forecast was changed, and IMF decided that the drop in world will be about minus 4.9%. It's plus 2 points minus. This is a great amount of the falling in GDP in a world amount, in a world condition. And the same did World Bank about the world trade turnover. During the same period, it forecast adjusted about 1%. For several countries, we can find the new forecasts for several very important for us, I mean for Russia, a very important country because it's included in the so-called BRICS country. For China, GDP forecast equals plus 1%. I would add for this forecast, for me, some interesting facts. I don't know if the same you see, but for me, it's absolutely surprised that we have no information today about the situation in China with coronavirus. China overcame with the problem of coronavirus during the first wave absolutely efficiency, but now we have no clear and open information about the China situation. Me, like most of other researchers on economics, I'm not absolutely believe in China statistics, but we have some figures and we can believe in the forecast of World Bank. Now the forecast equals +1 per year. But for India, other very big economy, minus 4.5, because the situation with COVID is very dramatic. Russia, minus 6.6. It depends not only due to COVID, but because in Russia, we have the most dramatic situation, but it depends with the internal problem with the sustainable development. South Africa, minus 8. Brazil, minus 9. The biggest developing countries have a problem on the level minus 8% per year. What about the developed markets? US, minus 8. Eurozone at all, minus 10. Germany about 8, France 12.5, Spain and Italy the same level, about minus 13. The situation in developed countries is more dramatic than in the emerging market. Why? I will show you why. I will show you some consideration about the reasons of such difference. Because in previous crisis, we tried to traditionally we saw the situation in developed country were better than the situation in emerging market and developing markets. But now they're vice versa. And the other problem which accompany the situation with coronavirus and pandemic in the world, the increasing geopolitical and economic crisis. This is a trade conflict between the US and China, regional conflicts. For example, in Russia, we see the conflict between the Russia and Ukraine, Russia due to the Crimea situation, due to Donetsk and Lugansk. You see the attempts to overthrow governments in former Soviet Republic during the previous 2 months. You see the first attempt in Belarus, second in Kyrgyzia. Unclear how will change the oil prices. This is additional uncertainty factor. But for long-term perspectives, we can see the fundamental problems in the world. Firstly, the exhaustion of the growth potential of the most advanced economics. For example, Japan, Western Europe, US, Korea, Canada, Australia, and the same situation, exhaustion in emerging markets. China demonstrates the decreasing of the growth rate, the same Russia, the same Central and Eastern Europe. 20 years ago, after the perestroika, after the soft revolution in the former Soviet, former socialistic country, you see, this country were the resources of world development because it creates new institutional factors for developing. Today, the main reason of the decreasing interest rate I see in demographic situation, decline in number of working age population, especially in developed markets. In Russia, the same. The imbalance of labor resource on global scale, the surplus labor force in some regions, and the deficit of labor force in other regions, and the big barriers for migration which now European zone creates for migration and flow. And we have other important problem. This is the climate change and the ecological problem, which impact on economic growth. You see this is the working age population. Working age means from 15 till 64. In Southern, I'm very sorry for title in Russian, but the translation you see in blue color. This is the facts and the forecast until to 2030. And you see North America is lack of population working age. Latin America, the same. And with the same China. You see, the two supplier of working age population, this is the Africa and South Central Asia. That's all. In Russian Federation, you see the same picture, dramatic falling rates of population in Russia. You see, we will have the real problem with the labor force and for up to the 2050, in spite of all efforts of our government to creating new incentives for young people to birth more and more. We have the specific program Mother Capital. Young family will have additional money for additional child. It's helped but a little bit. It's not solved the problem. And what should we do in such situation? What should we do in Russia? What should we do in the world? Up to me, and not only up to my mind, the coronavirus control is not a medical issue. This is an economic issue, because it's only the factor which show us very brightly how many problems we have inside the developed markets and in the world economy. We need to study relationships between the pandemic and the economy. We need to study the main fundamental problems in our world development. For example, firstly, we need to solve the problem of imbalance in income in developed country, in developing country, especially in emerging market. And getting out of pandemic and getting out of a recession is not the same. I believe absolutely that the world will overcome with pandemic situation faster than we getting out of the economic crisis. And the most pessimistic focused in this situation will be that the after pandemic world falls into the depression, not falls into the recovery. One of the problem leads on the side of unequal cost location, because the different industries suffer from a pandemic in different way. How different country will respond to the economic crisis? Different country have different money. Different governments have their different plans how to do with the pandemic, with the economic crisis. And it seems to me the agreement between common global agreement between the most countries, between most governments in the world, will be the most problematic issue. You see, the situation with the pandemic wave. I'm sorry for sound. The very beginning of the pandemic, not the problem on the side of China healthcare system. The very beginning was start from the March, and the problem goes through the European zone first, and after that the situation rised in the US and emerging markets, and during the June all parts of the world was in the same situation. Now you see the beginning of the so-called second wave of the pandemic from the September, and we can see the same dynamic of the numbers of infected population in different countries. And no interest for us, not the number of infected, because we are talking about not the medicine issue, but the economic issue. This is how government responds to the COVID. You see, at the very beginning, from March to April, the response of all governments in the world was absolutely adequate to the situation with the infected population. But after the middle of April, when we were during the May, you see the difference between the wave of coronavirus and the responses of governments were more and more different. Why? Absolutely clear answer: because the population are tired of stay-at-home situation, because summer period was start, vacations, and people would like to have fun, would like to have freedom during this period, and so on. And the problems start again. And how lockdown and restriction impact on the business activity in developed market and emergent markets. The different governments decided to have their different way, and the most democratic, so-called democratic, was Sweden government. They decided have no very strong restrictions, and you see the impact of lockdown in Sweden was the least, and the most strong restriction was in Italy, in UK, and now you know that UK began with a second period of stay-at-home, and the US looks like Sweden in this situation, and the activity further below previous levels started to showed from the August. And what about the emerging markets? You see the result of restrictions started shown from the very beginning of coronavirus and pandemic situation, because of weakness of economies, inner problems of economies. Situation in Russia is not the worst, but the worst situation we see in India, in Mexico, and maybe Brazil. In Turkey, at the very beginning of pandemic restriction, the situation was dramatic, and now it's not so. And in Taiwan, the best results up to the business activity, because they did not have such strong restriction for the government. But what about how we will overcome with the economic problem? Can we use monetary stimulus for supporting markets? can we use the very effective in the previous crisis tools like monetary tools? We can see the absolutely extraordinary attempts from the side of leading central banks in the world. Um, all leading central banks decided to cut their discount rates. The same did our central bank, I mean in the Russian Federation. You see, I'm sorry for Russian, but in red color you see the discount rate by Federal Reserve System in US, in blue, light blue, Bank of UK, in dark blue, Bank of Japan, European Central Bank, this is the lowest level. And what about the assets of leading central banks? This picture shows the total assets. You see Federal Reserve System, this one, European Central Bank, this one, Japanese Central Bank, and Great Britain in red. Total liquidity rised during 3 months only till plus $5 trillion. This is absolutely extraordinary attempts to support the biggest markets in the world. But did it very effective? A little bit. Can we use the same tools like in the previous situation? We can, but partly. Past experience, we have some lessons from the past experience. For example, largest crisis in the world in terms of declining consumption. Firstly, of course, Second World War. We in Russia called Second World War a Great Patriotic War. It was the absolutely clear situation with the decline in consumption. First World War, Great Depression at the beginning of previous century, and economic recession after the Spanish pandemic. But all these crises had the financial nature, and now we have economic nature of today's crisis. What the most interesting and the most honored research shows us about the relationship between the economy and pandemic. Firstly, I would like to stress your opinion on the EDA paper in 2016. This is very well done statistically investigation. Now, the main result was the higher the spread of the virus, the higher the economic benefits of restrictive measures. We see the result of lockdown was absolutely shown faster after the such measure, and economic benefits really we can see. For example, in Moscow, in Russian Federation, we can see the better situation with the infected number of people after the restriction during previous 2 weeks. Tunstrom and his co-authors, Berger and others papers, numerical estimation of the benefits of limitation depends on the value of statistical lives. What does it mean, value of statistical lives? It's index which can show us how much one man can earn during the working life. Different estimation, different calculation shows us different figures for different countries. According to Luigi Zingales, this index for US equals to $10 million. According to calculation by Sergei Guriev for Russia, value of statistical life in Russian Federation equals to 5.8 million rubles. For understanding 5 you need to divide $1 for 70 rubles. Now, but this calculation was done then the $1 was equals to the 64 rubles. And 6 weeks of the quarantine reduce France's GDP by 6% for this month. According to the Todo investigation, the month of quarantine in Tokyo, only Tokyo, not at all in the Japan, reduced Japan GDP by 5%. The economic problem, which were demonstrated by pandemic, was decline in production, closing and reducing jobs, global supply chain and internal supply chain disruption, liquidity problems in banks and total financial system, decline in demands, falling of incomes, disposable incomes, especially the ban on the consumption of certain services, especially transportation, air transportation, tourism, recreations at all, decrease in investment and purchases, and possible collapse of financial system. And we need to understand which form of the GDP dynamics we will see in different countries. Depending on how far the crisis spiral goes, it can take several forms. Firstly, and the best form for us, this is the weak form, because it's a sharp drop and absolutely rapid recovery. U form, it's a good form because the depression period will be very short. But the worst form is L form because we can see the depression and no chance to recovery in the obvious period. You see, I mentioned before the unequal allocation of costs. It's according to the research of McKinsey. You see the most problem situation during the first wave of pandemic is with the air transportation, insurance, banks, real estate, automotive and assembly, and etc. etc. This is the more, and oil and gas, of course, because of transportation drop and the some primary production is drop. And what about the package of stimulus from the governments for their countries? We need to compare the amount of packages between the most developed country. On the first place, of course, Germany. Different calculation we will see during my presentation, but Germany will be on the first position. Second, Italy, because of absolutely dramatic falling down into depression. On the third position, France. next UK, US, and Spain, you can't see here Russian government package. But what about the government support, which target should be on the first position of this supportment? Should we support business, or should we support the population? This is the two polar position, two polar points, two polar targets. Our government decided to support both business and population, but during first wave we can't do it because we have enough money, because we have the big money in the so-called reserve fund for this target, but reserve fund is not without the bottom, and we need to create now not the total supportment for all personalities, for all industries. Now we need to find the absolutely concentrated supportment, because money could be goes to the end. International Monetary Foundation forecast was done during the April after the first stage of pandemic crisis. You see about the previous falling down into the recession for several countries. In the red frame, you see the Russian figures. Minus 7.4 in compare with previous year, minus 5.5 in compare with next year. And what about the effects of quarantine? In red, again, Russia, but you can see your country. This is according to the calculation by OECD. The best situation in Ireland, South Africa, and the worst situation in Greek. Losses of quarantine differs from country to country, and estimate about the 10% of GDP in optimistic forecast by IMF, more realistic about minus 20 for third quarter of this year, and for in euro earning in economy, salaries and profits lost will be equals to the 20%. Losses from first wave of pandemic for Russia, you can see such some figures about the calculations. You see for the second quarter equals to the minus 7.2, for third 3.4%. But if second wave lasts until third quarter of next year, it could be possible for Russian Federation because of our climate. We have very long period of winter and the earlier spring. GDP for 2020 may fall to 4.4 and can grow in the next year only by 1%. For us, this is the problematic situation, because Russian need to grow faster than other emerging markets, because we need to create additional resources for sustainable development, because our productivity level is less than, for example, in US in 30 times. it's absolutely a problem issue for developing. And some researchers thinking about the causes of soft type crisis of the first wave in Russia decided to show us some interesting idea. Firstly, the one cause of soft crisis is the large share of public sector. Many state-owned enterprises in Russian Federation, Russian industries, and the federal budget can support such enterprises and pay salaries and wages in spite of a small amount of work. Second is the share of services requiring personal interaction in Russia is lower than in developed countries. Only 3 regions, Kaliningrad region, Moscow, and St. Petersburg, have more than 20% of regional domestic products. More than 20% belongs to the service sector. Others less than 10. And the one more reason for soft type of crisis is the lack of inflow of foreign capital. During the first wave, foreign capital go back to the home from many countries, but our amount of inflow of foreign capital was very low during the previous period, and we can't lose nothing, then we have zero. That's why we have no big changes in inflow of foreign capital. This is a very interesting idea, was said by Ruben Nikolopov, rector of our new economic school. It's a very good university and point institution for study in Moscow. And the benefits of second wave will be less uncertainty.
Dear participants, Professor Rozhanska will be back soon. She has some technical issues with the computer. So let's wait for a couple of minutes until she reconnects. Sorry for the delay, everyone. While we are waiting, I will post the information on the certificates in the chat. Please fill in the feedback form after this lecture to get a certificate of attendance.
I'm very sorry. I guess I have said too many times a word problem, and that's why we have a problem. Very sorry for this inconvenience because problem with the electricity. And let me continue. Yes, try to change the screen and mm, yes, okay. Okay, uh, that's this is the right slide. It's about the difference in income classes. Um, the most suffered from the pandemic crisis was the middle class, so-called middle class. But this is the separate task to calculate the boundaries of middle class. You see the two different definitions for middle class. So first from Esther Duflo, Nobel Prize laureate, no poorer than is they live on $2 or $10 a day, and others from the Pew Research Center from 10 till 50 days, $50 per day, from 75 and 125% of the median income in a country to 67 and 2,000 200% of the median income in country. Let's take broadest definition from 60 till 200% of the median income for country, and for Russian it will be equals to the 19 and 60,000 rubles per month. It's equal to about the 280, $360 per month. It's not a very rich level, but in Russia, only 40% of population receive such kind of salary and wages. In country which has the biggest territory in the world, one of the biggest mineral resource in the world, we have big amount of poor people. The imbalance in income, one of the biggest problem for developing in our country. The Ministry of Economic Development predicted a 3.8% drop in this disposable income. It means that our country goes to the previous level of the 2011, 9 years ago. It's a dramatic situation for households. The three highest wage industries in 2020 are in dire straits now. Firstly, finance and insurance. Banks have problems with the income and credits, of course, because of lack of disposable income from the side of households. Extraction of minerals. Price and volumes are falling due to the OPEC Plus agreement and other factors. And the science, due to the restriction in the science sphere and scientific sphere, and due to declining in income of universities. And falling income in regions with a high share of small and medium-sized businesses. In Moscow, in St. Petersburg, we see that the supportment from the federal budget and regional budget needs to go to these regions, because the micro-sized enterprises and micro and medium-sized enterprises suffered from the pandemic situation in the worst way, because they were in the suffered industries: tourism, horeca, hospitality. This is the sphere we need to be supported. The pandemic effects on consumption was real great, because many people lost their jobs, and upper quintile of population. Upper quintile means that 20% of richest population in the country, in terms of equal, lost its usual pattern of consumption. Travels, entertainment, cultural events, and especially in developed countries, we see the same situation. And the upper quintile can support total demand, can support total amount of consumption. You see, the aggregated demand consists of four big parts. Firstly, and the biggest part, consumption equals about 60% of total expenses in economy. The most mobile part, investment. Investors try to be very mobile due to crisis situation. Next one, net export, which equals to export minus import, and the expenses from the government side. And we need to support consumption. We need to support population. Consumption structure of goods and services in previous period depending on the impact of the pandemic. You see, in Germany, the most reduced during lockdown cost, this is the transportation cost, recreation. For Japan, it's the same situation: transport, recreation, and horeca. And cost rising during the lockdown was medicine, of course. First place belongs to the USA, and for in a world it's equals to the about 10% rising during lockdown because of disaster relief. And you see how changes the consumption in the four countries: US, China, Germany, and Russia. The hardest hit industry in US, you see the dynamic of GDP growth rate and manufacturing rate. Accommodation, of course, accommodation and catering, finance and insurance, healthcare and social service, art, entertainment, and recreation. You can ask me why healthcare suffered in US during the pandemic. Because of declining expenses from the side people in the pension period, because they prefer to stay at home in this period and doesn't spend time for medicine. Unemployment in the United States was a result of the first wave in the pandemic, but the figure is sharply high, and after the end of the first wave, it recovered. But the healthcare and social service, it's equals minus 1.5 million people from their working resources. And in accommodation, catering, recreation, and entertainment arts, 3 million minus from the labor force. What about the type of goods and services in consumption dynamic in the US? You see, the most suffered is services, of course, from March till the beginning of the second wave. In durable goods, it's not such dramatic situation, but the most dramatic service, because in developed market, in US market, it's play a big role, more than 25, about 30% of GDP belongs to the service. In China, other situation, because the China started first of coronavirus problem, and in January we can see the falling down of GDP growth rates in February, but you see absolutely reform of GDP, rapid falling and fast recovering. This is absolutely lucky situation. Unemployment, of course, rapidly growing in February after the first hit on first drop, and after that slowly decreasing. The rate of unemployment situation is slowly recovering. Dynamic of retail sales in China, the same reform. It's again lucky situation. It's very stable, in a sustainable sustainable character of development. For different positions for goods and services, beverage, this is the rise, clothes and shows down, it's understandable, like as household appliance, but drugs and communication mechanism, it's rising again. What about Germany? What about the Middle European territory? You see U-shape of curve. More time needs, economy needs more time for recovering. From February till March and April, May until July, they need to recover in the situation. The problems in economy is deeply because the previous rate of growth is slower than in economy of fast developing Chinese economy. Unemployment rising during the first wave and on the stable level during the second part of first wave. Again, V-shaped curve into dynamics of retail sales in Germany again. And this is again U-shaped form about the retail sales, private consumptions, personal saving, and index of consumer price. Private consumption, of course, down during the COVID, and now they are trying to recovering. And what about Russia? You see, in March we started decreasing, and until July, and we didn't go to the bottom yet. It shows us the real problematic situation with the developing, because we have the L form of curve. Unemployment, we have no big problem with unemployment because in the previous period our indexes of unemployment was very low in compare of European indexes and world indexes. But now we reached to the medium European indexes level of the 6.3, 6.4. Russian retail with its absolutely fast decreasing at the very beginning of pandemic and very slow recovering. It looks like rather L than the V. And the last problem which I would like to describe today, this is a problem with migration, internal and external. I would like to show you the results of very interesting paper by Volchechi about the how migrants can create additional problem with the coronavirus, because from the big cities, migrants go back to their home cities and towns and take with them the problem with the infections. It will be additional resource for infecting other population in small town in a country. But the additional problem is that the migrants goes back to the homes, and it creates additional problem on the labor market in big city, especially in Russia, in Moscow. Moscow is the biggest labor market in Russian Federation because about 20 million people live in Moscow and in suburbs. And now the decreasing in amount of numbers of migrants equals to 40% of deficit of job places, especially in the constructions, agricultures, communals, services. This is a problem because the level of wage in this industry is not very high, and citizens, locals doesn't want to work at such low level of wage, and locals creates and goes to the other industries, for example, to services, to banking, to office job, doesn't want to work in the communal services. And the municipality in Moscow now is faced to the problems with the communal quality of services. And competitions for migrants lead to higher wages, but we have no chance to have additional migrants from our former Soviet countries. And it's about the government support for Russia. It's real low and not sufficient for recovering very high. You see the L form of growth rate. And I promised you to show the list of publication concerning the coronavirus and pandemic. And I had no time to show you additional slides because the problem of the connection. And if you have any question, I'd like to answer or maybe clarify some points of my presentation. Yes? Have you any questions?
The participants, you can speak up or write in the chat. Okay, no questions then. Professor Rozhanska, then we thank you very much for the lecture and for agreeing to take part in our inter-lectures project. and we are looking forward to your future lectures in the framework of our project in the next semester. And thank you to all the participants who have been with us today. And at this, we are completing our series of interlectures. Thank you very much. Thank you to those of you who participated in all of them. I see some of you here. And
I guess maybe we will have chance to meet in our scientific events. For example, I invite all participants for our November conference, international conference. It will start next week from 10th of November. Our first events will take place on Tuesday, and I invite all for very interesting events, panel sessions, scientific sessions. It will help until the 14th of November.
here is the link to register at the conference and read more about the program and so on. And please don't forget to fill in the feedback form. And goodbye.
Bye, thank you very much. And maybe we will find the common research interest to continue our cooperation with our honored participants today.